Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Brian Luck at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I want to thank you for having me here today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the impact of wheel traffic on alfalfa yield and soil compaction. Presenting this is the work of my graduate student, Mr. Parker Williams. He's busy preparing for another alfalfa harvest here in a week or so, so I figured I'd take care of this for him. Also want to acknowledge my collaborators, Dr. Dennis Hancock, before he was at the USDA Dairy Forage Research Center, was at the University of Georgia, and he was a collaborator on this project with us. Dr. Francisco Arriaga at the University of Wisconsin in soil science. Dr. Jessica Drury is a faculty associate that works with me in biological systems engineering. And then Dr. Nandita Guar at the University of Georgia, who is working on the component of the project down there, which I'll tell you about shortly. So getting into things, what the question we sort of had when we started out was, when we look at alfalfa harvest, there's a variety of equipment involved, very much different from other harvest scenarios as far as the quantity of equipment going in and out of the field. And as a machinery engineer, my first thing I think about is I love the equipment, but what's that doing to the plant? What's that doing to the soil as we go in and out of these fields? So first question was around compaction, and what are we looking at there in terms of compaction with the machines going in and out of the field? And then are we getting any yield or quality loss due to that? And what is actually causing problems, if there are any, based on, are we doing plant damage, or is it solely due to soil compaction? So the first part of this I'll tell you about is basically the work that's going on at Georgia. I don't have any data on this just yet, but we're pretty proud of the concept here. So I'll walk you through a little bit of that. So basically we have a compaction machine, or what we like to call a compaction machine. So it's pneumatic, and we grow alfalfa in these 6-inch diameter tubes here. I'll use my mouth to kind of point things here. So basically we fill this soil column with soil, the tube with soil. We have a pneumatic actuator on top that's able to apply force to that. We attach different plates on that actuator. So we have a plate that covers the entire soil surface. We have a plate that compacts what we're saying is the soil, but doesn't impact the plant. So it has a hole in the center. And then we're also just pushing on the crown of the plant and not on the soil around the plant with that. Plants are being grown in the greenhouse and then grown in these tubes in and out of this machine to apply compaction. I have a short video here, and I think it should play just fine to show you kind of how this works. This was in our prototyping stage, so it's a little slower than it actually works now, but you'll basically see the plunger going in and out. And basically this is completely automated. So you set up the amount of pressure, and there's a feedback loop with a sensor on the pressure side to be able to tell how much force is being applied there. So moving on from the work being done in Georgia, just kind of a neat little engineering thing I wanted to show you there, to what we're doing in Wisconsin. We'll get back to sort of the question at hand. This is a extension publication that Dr. Arriaga and Geoffrey Simmering and I put together based on soil compaction planning at harvest. You can see the number A4158 there if you want to go look it up at the UW Learning Store. But basically we were talking about, we had a couple of wet years in the fall and wet years in the spring, and we were looking at compaction and other things and how that sort of impacted the field and long-term crop growth, things along those lines. And one of the figures in that publication is from a little bit of past work that we've done, where we put GPS receivers on every piece of equipment working in alfalfa harvest. So if you look at the right here, this is basically just the chopper and how the forage harvester went through the field. If you look at the left, this is the forage harvester plus approximately 12 trucks to carry the forage away from the machine, and mowers and mergers. So the real concept here, I'm certain the scale of the dots in that image is not to scale as far as the footprint of the vehicle. But that said, you can look at all of the machines that went in and out of there. Now, I will tell you that I had a conversation with the collaborating farmer on this project. And he basically told me, he said he tells his drivers never to drive in the same track twice. Now, I'm not a soil scientist, but I do know a few, and I play one on TV sometimes. Basically, what I've learned from them is if you have a soil at field capacity, the amount of compaction you generate is probably mostly due to the first time you run it over. So running it over multiple times doesn't add as much compaction and problems in the soil as running over it once. So this sort of made me scratch my head a little bit, and I told the producer, I said, what if you tried to minimize the wheel tracks going through the field? Do you think that would help you out as far as yield or quality or regrowth or anything? He was a little standoffish, but he said, prove it to me. So what we did is we went out and got this USDA funded project to do this work. So we're pretty excited about that. And I'll tell you a little more about that in the future. So basically we're looking at all the machinery in the field, and just to give you some idea of what the machines weigh, unloaded by themselves. Basically you're looking anywhere from 12,500 pounds on average for a mower, up to, if you look at a semi truck, 53,000 pounds unloaded. So as you look at some of these machines and think about the different tires and other things that are on them, one of the things you'll kind of get in your head is maybe machines are getting too big and too heavy. One thing I will point out is there is a difference between agricultural tires and road tires, and it's a pretty big difference. So my graduate student went out and took some of these numbers here that machine weights and calculated based on tire footprint and tire size, how much ground pressure they're applying to the soil. And I'll show you that graph here. Now, granted, this is all based on manufacturers reported information. You know, we weren't able to go out and exactly measure this. But if you do look, all of the ag machines are, I'm trying to point at my screen, all of the ag machines are down here in the lower left-hand corner in the 100 to 200, maybe 250 max PSI ground pressure that they're applying. All of those machines, excuse me, have agricultural tires on them. If you look a little further up the graph with the straight trucks or the box trucks and the semi trucks, you see a great increase in the ground pressure applied at the tires due to the fact that, you know, those are road tires. They're pumped up to 100 psi. They're hard as a rock. And if you have a soil at field capacity, you will likely be causing a pretty substantial amount of compaction with those pieces of machinery going in and out of the field. Just to talk about tire pressure quickly, if you look at, we're talking mostly about ag machines here on this chart and table. Basically what we're looking at is the slope of the line there. And looking at the slope of the line, basically you can tell how much compaction or ground pressure increase per PSI in tire pressure. So if you look at tractor front and rear tires, if you go up 1 PSI, you're basically applying 7 to 8 pounds of extra ground pressure when you do that. A lot of that basically spreads across the board. Some of the ones you'll see that are a little higher or lower are kind of based on the amount of weight that is on the tire. So we assumed basically 60-40 for tractors, rear and front in that case. Choppers was about the same thing, but would have been backwards, more weight on the front of the machine. But you know, if you look at a swather caster, it's pretty low number. It's 5.22, but there's not a lot of weight being carried on that. Most of the weight of that machine is over the front tires. So anyway, when you consider taking your machines to the field, one of the things that I like to talk about, and it's an easy fix, is to make sure that the tire pressure is set properly before you go out there. And a lot of manufacturers, there's some manufacturers out there that are doing automatic tire pressure systems on them now as well. So that's a good step in the right direction as far as compaction and impact to the plants that we have when we run our machines through the field. So back to the study I was telling you about, basically how much soil compaction is added when we run through the field. How does this affect alfalfa yield and quality? And then can we possibly predict or prevent some of these losses if there are any moving forward? So with this study, we're working at the Arlington Agricultural Research Station in Arlington, Wisconsin. It's a flagship research station at the University of Wisconsin. We did a field of new seeding alfalfa in 2019. So spring of 2019, it was planted and established. We have 4 tillage treatments within this study. So I'll show you that in a minute, but there was heavy tillage, excuse me, what we're calling medium tillage, no-till, and then we also included a second-year stand of alfalfa in this study as well. We have multiple treatments within that for applying wheel traffic, which I'll tell you about. We harvested 4 times during the 2019 growing season, 4 times on the standing alfalfa, and we got 3 harvests off of the new seeding. We skipped the first harvest with that one. And now we've harvested it 3 times in 2020. So we're going through that again. We will get 4 harvests off of both the standing alfalfa, which will be in its 3rd year of production, and the new seeding this year, which we're headed out to do the 4th harvest here in a couple of weeks. We're measuring a lot of things, and I didn't even list them all here, but we're measuring yield, moisture content. We're working on measuring quality of the crop. We're also doing growth staging as well, and then we're doing compaction and several soil measurements as well throughout this process. So just to give you sort of a top-down view of where we're at, this is the field we're in. You can see our 2nd-year alfalfa crop is here on the left, and then we have the 3 tillage blocks within the study, no-till, medium till, and heavy tillage there. So the heavy tillage was tilled the fall of 2018, fairly deep tillage operation at that point, and then tilled again in the spring of 2019 before we seeded it with a field finisher of some sort. Medium tillage was just tilled in the spring and not so deeply with the field finisher as well. No-till, obviously, we didn't have a tillage tool. We just planted right into whatever residue was in the field prior. And I believe the 2nd-year alfalfa stand was a no-till plot as well. That's the way they generally planted it at Arlington. Whoops, one too far. And then we do a lot of UAV work in the lab, so we get some of these pretty pictures, but you can see how the field lays out there with our plots. The 2nd-year alfalfa stand is here on the left, and then our 3 tillage treatments alfalfa stand is here on the right. One thing I like to point out, I'll show you a picture again here in a minute that might show this a little better, but if you look closely just at these pictures here, you're starting to see alfalfa growing here, and then all of a sudden you have this little short width every once in a while. These plots were randomized across the with the 3 replications going, well, it'd be north to south here, but this way. You're starting to see some of the impact there that we're having on this crop by running it over with wheel traffic. So just something interesting you wouldn't necessarily catch standing on the ground all the time. So just to take you through a little bit about the sort of process we're going through here, we use the swather to cut the alleyways off to isolate our plots, and that's the swather we've been using the whole time. That machine weighs about 17,000 pounds, and that's what we're using to apply compaction as well. So basically that machine is easily maneuverable, easily controlled, and we can get over these plots pretty quickly with it. So that's what we chose to do. Not the best representation of what's happening in the field because of the different weights of the machines and the different tires, etc. But we wanted to just get an idea of what sort of standardized. We needed to standardize our weight so we didn't introduce a lot of errors. So the way we're doing it here is just using the swather to apply compaction every time. Looking at harvest, basically we want, once we cut the alleyways off, we use the plot harvester to go through, and then we measure the length of the plot. We know the width of the plot harvester, so we're able to get yield. Once that plot's harvested, we come through and cut individual plants left and right of that harvest path and take that back to the lab, and also do growth staging on that as well. We have been in 2020. So once we've gathered our yield data, we were trying to come up with a way, because the plot harvester took, we'll just call it an excessive amount of time to get the rest of the alfalfa off of the plots. We kind of figured it out. So we're able to take this sickle bar mower on the left here, and that hangs out about 7 feet. So we can get about 14 feet off of each plot. And then we use a merger to where we're hanging that right hand. It would be right hand of the operator. It's on the left as you're viewing it here. Basically hanging that out over the plot and not letting it touch the ground, essentially, to lift the remaining material off and get it off the plots to let them regrow for the next harvest. So that, compared to pushing that little 2-foot plot harvester through everything, has significantly sped up our harvest time. So as you learn as you go, that's what we've been able to do here, and we're getting a little faster at collecting our data, which is a good thing. So just another quick aerial view to show you what they look like once everything's harvested. No gee whiz here. We basically collect the material we'll pull in samples from and put it out in the alleyways, which doesn't make it very pretty, but they're not in the plot, impacting the regrowth of those plots and the plants in the plot. So this next slide is going to be a little bit confusing, but I'll talk you through it just so you understand kind of what we're doing here. My student put it together and he said it was clear as mud to him, but I'll need to talk you through it. So basically, when we apply compaction, or what we're calling wheel traffic, to these plots, we left alleyways between the plots to be able to get the swather through. So if you look, the first pass here is going south to north with the blue color. And that's basically running flag to flag within the plot, is the exact width of the harvester tire width. We make a pass there, we make a right-hand turn and come back through the plot, literally right next to our first pass. So we're applying compaction to the entire plot. So we go 3 passes in one direction. So first, and the second pass will be to the right, third pass to the right. And then we move over to the 4th pass, 5th pass, and 6th pass, which is on the other side of the plot. So we do, the 4th pass is to the right as well. Long story short, we're basically applying compaction to the entire plot, not getting into adjacent plots by leaving an alleyway there, okay? We also have what we're calling a simulated silage, and I'll explain a little bit more of this later, but basically we do 1 pass tires through the plots. And we're trying to see, this is sort of comes back to our soil science friends, where they show the picture, and I'll show it a little bit later, of how the soil is not compacted just straight down, their side loading as well. So we're trying to see if we can see an impact due to that. That simulated silage has timing with it as well. I'll go through the treatments here with you in a few minutes. So just a quick video, kind of how we apply compaction. Basically, the swather goes through. We have an individual kind of in front of it. We're only going 2-3 miles an hour, so there's no chance of getting run over or anything like that, but basically guiding to make sure 1 tire pass goes right next to the previous pass, and we're applying compaction to the entire field. The other thing I mentioned earlier, and this is a video as well, is the compaction measurements we're doing. So we started with 5 reps per plot. Realized that was a bit excessive, so we backed down to 3 reps, 3 compaction probe pushes per plot this year. But that still works out to be well over a couple hundred compaction probe pushes on each given harvest, and we do that 4 times a year. So collecting a lot of compaction data about this as well, just to see what the response of the soil is as we move forward. So getting into our treatments quickly, basically we have 7 of them. This number 7 is obviously 0 compaction, so that's just the plot harvesters. I've only been on those plots and nothing else. Starting at the top, single pass silage is 1 application compaction after harvesting the entire plot. So that's basically just mowing, and that's the compaction over the entire thing. Then we have 3 pass and 5 pass silage, which is another application. 1 immediately after harvest, 1 24 hours, and 1 26 hours later. And then the 5 pass is 2 passes of compaction at 24 and 26 later. Same thing with the hay, except it's spread out a little more, thinking like the hay would dry over quite a bit more time. So 1 compaction application immediately after harvest, and 1 48 hours and 1 72 hours later. Same thing on the 5 pass hay. So 2 48 hours later and 2 72 hours later. Simulated silage was what I was telling you about before, where we do two-wheel tracks within the plot, and then one pass 24 hours later and two passes 26 hours later. So counting for all the pieces of equipment, so mower, merger, chopper, and transport vehicle, and all ran over the same patch of alfalfa. So I was getting to earlier about the compaction applied. This is in one of our extension pubs I'll talk about a little later, but basically as the wheel rolls over soil and the soil is capable of being compacted if field capacity are near it, the compaction does go straight down, but it also goes sideways as well. So trying to see if we can sort of quantify and see that within this study. So getting to a few results, most of these are 2019 results that I'm showing today. That said, basically the 2020 are starting to look about the same, but we don't have them completely analyzed yet. So looking at dry matter yield, this is after, this is completely dry matter. The zero compaction control had the highest yield, and then everything fell out. They're not statistically different after that, but numerically 3-pass silage and 3-pass hay, 5-pass silage, 5-pass hay. Then oddly, the single-pass silage and simulated silage were the lowest numbers as far as dry matter goes. If you look at it wet out of the field, I called it wet matter yield. I'm not sure that's exactly the way to say this though. In 2019, it kind of fell out like we thought it would. So control obviously was the highest yielding at 7.5 tons per acre. Then we have single pass silage and simulated silage right behind it, not statistically different from the zero compaction. Then 3-pass, all the 3 and 5-pass stuff was lower than that, and statistically different from the zero compaction control. So we are seeing yield reductions in alfalfa, and I think they're pretty substantial. They're on the order of 0.5 ton per acre, which is quite a bit. Getting into compaction, just to show you a little bit here. Basically, we took cone index and looked at all the different. This is 5 reps per line on this guy with the averages, but this fell out about like we thought it would too, which is good. You know, I jokingly say physics works, but the zero compaction, the zero wheel traffic plot had the least compaction out of all of them. The single pass silage and the 3 simulated silage and single pass over had the next, which is the blue and red here. And then all of the 3 and 5 pass silage and haze were all higher, down to about 6 inches and remain so. So we are seeing differences in soil cone penetrometer, cone index, the PSI. So we are starting to see some compaction there as well. More results to come on this in the future as we get a little more data analyzed as well. So I wanted to talk quickly. We do have a UAV component in this unmanned aerial vehicle. So that on the left is our workhorse that can do vegetative indices, visible light, and thermal. We got into a new one here as well. It's called a Quantix, and I'll show a quick video of it taking off. It's pretty neat. We're able to do a lot bigger area with this one. Basically, it's a fixed wing that takes off like a quadcopter. So it takes off vertically, flies up to altitude, and then if you watch closely, it'll transition to horizontal flight. Flies about 60 miles an hour, and you pre-plan out the flight. There's no really no control over this thing other than computer control. It's got GPS. You have a come home button. You have a land where you are button, and you have a give up button, basically, where this thing comes out of the sky pretty quickly if you get into trouble. So a neat little unit, and is able to collect visible light and vegetative index measurements as well. So the NDVIs and DREs, things like that you've heard about. So looking at our alfalfa plots, this would be our tillage treatment block here. So heavy tillage here, medium or light tillage, and then no tillage here on the left. And this would be shortly after green up in 2019, I believe. So these had been recently seeded, but the plants were up and growing pretty well. But you see a lot of red in there, and that's why that is. That's the seeing soil basically through the plants with young plants. I will show you a post fourth cutting in 2019 here, and things look a lot different. So you're starting to see our alleyways where we turn that swather around. We're doing some pretty substantial damage there. But you can see down through our treatments, you know, pretty sizable differences among the different treatments in our replications. So we're pretty encouraged about that. We haven't quite gotten through all the analysis to say whether we're able to detect these differences, but we are able to see them visually in the maps as well. Just to reinforce that a little bit, you see number 7 versus number 5. 7 was the 0 compaction and 5 is 3 pass hay. My student just kind of cherry picked a few here, but the 7 is much greener than the 5, obviously, which is kind of what you'd expect as the plants and the compaction happens. You're going to start to see some damage. I have a nice picture of Dr. Hancock here. He was very excited when he came up to visit us to look at these plots as we got into it. But basically, this is what I was talking about before. If you look very closely here at the top of the growing alfalfa, you can kind of see a stair-step pattern through it, and that was evident in a lot of places in our plot. So we were able to see basically growth stage retarding due to our application of wheel traffic, and we're quantifying that this year with growth staging as we harvest. And seeing some pretty big differences there as well. So kind of applying what we've learned, here's what we want to do is kind of relate the UAV data from our plot compaction and yield quality data. We want to try to apply this to production fields. So we went out and did basically the same thing I showed you before. This is another field within an operation looking at all the machines that went through it. Again, the size of the dots is not relative to the size of the machine footprint. But you can see there's a lot of machinery moving through that field to collect alfalfa, harvest alfalfa. Zooming in on it just a little bit, just to show you, you can see field entry points here, there and there. And then we have some areas out here that maybe aren't compacted as much. So basically highlighting the field entry, as well as an area here right alongside of the homestead that wasn't hardly driven on very much at all. If you look at an NDVI value of that, a vegetative index value of that, you can see at the edge of the fields where machines are coming in and out a little bit redder. And then you look right here where we were pointing out before, you can see that's quite a bit greener in there. So maybe we can get at with that NDVI, more plant damage caused by wheel traffic and regrowth than what we were able to see, by eye before. So pretty interesting application of UAVs there, and we're pretty excited to see these just visual results, and we haven't even gotten too excited or too far along analyzing them officially yet. So pretty exciting stuff there. So giving, to wrap up here quickly, next steps, sort of a summary. What we're seeing so far is application of wheel traffic showed between 0.45 and 0.56 ton per acre dry matter reduction when compared to the no traffic control. I had some producers talk to me recently about that, and they said, that's basically $100 and some an acre that they're losing by having that half a ton per acre reduction over their fields. The next step from that is we do have the GPS and the footprints of all the machines. We're going to try to go back and see just how much of that field was impacted by tire traffic, which I think, I can't really give you a number. I'd be speculating completely, but it's enough to probably get our attention of how much of that soil out there in the field saw wheel traffic. We're working toward assessing quality. We got a little setback on that due to COVID this year, but we do have everything kind of ground and ready to go. Just as soon as we can get back in the lab to get that done, we will. We're going to analyze our UAV data and machinery movement data is what I was talking about, and then analyze the compaction data, which we're currently working on. And then obviously, untenured professor here, we publish. So we're heading that direction. Excuse me. So some recommendations, always, I'm an extension engineer, so I always leave with some recommendation, but my big things would say tire pressure matters. Make sure you check that before you go in the field and try to apply as little ground pressure as you can with the machines that you have. I would limit transport trucks in the field if I could. If there's a way we can side load those on the road and just completely keep them out of the field, I would love to do that. That takes a lot of that ground pressure off of the plants and off of the soil. If you can utilize tractors and tow dump carts instead of those trucks, it would even be better or be as good. Just because those are ag tires and they put down quite a bit less pressure than the trucks. The other thing I kind of bring up, and they do in Europe and other places, is stick to infield roads or what we call tram lines. and try to run over those spots as much as possible and keep any other wheel traffic off of the soil that hasn't been impacted. that will obviously kill the alfalfa in that spot, kill whatever crop you have growing there. But you're keeping the compaction very localized in one place and able to not spread that out over the whole field, which we're trying to avoid. A couple things I'll draw your attention to too before I finish up here. We have a couple publications out on this. One's an extension pub, so A4181. If you want to go to the University of Wisconsin Extension Learning Store, you can find it there. But it's basically what I presented here today is how much ground pressure I'm applying with different tires and different vehicle configurations. Mr. Williams wrote that, or my graduate student. We have a few other influential people that made sure it was right before he submitted it. And then we also have another interesting thing. So we worked with a group in biological systems engineering that was looking at hyperspectral remote sensing. And they, new professor in our department, I told her, I said, I have these plots. We know there's yield differences out there. You should fly them and see if you could pick that up with your sensor. And turns out she did. So I put the link in there, but it's alfalfa yield prediction using UAV-based hyperspectral imagery and also ensemble learning. So interesting little extra for this project that we were able to get done. Obligatory funding slide here, but we did get this through the Alfalfa and Forage Research Program at the USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. So very excited to be working with USDA on this and hoping it's something we can continue to investigate. I've had a lot of other questions about exactly what impact tire pressure has, what's the difference in tires and tracks. You know, there's all kinds of things we can look at here to get some more interesting information. With that, I think I'll end. Put my email and Twitter handle up there. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to talk with you.